What's good, gamers? 'Tis I, Kyoke. Got a long one for y'all today. It's a guide on common Party Finder strats for the Abyssos Savage tier. And while there's a lot of really good and informative YouTube guides out there, some of them have outdated strats for Party Finder specifically. So if you're unsure about how North America Party Finder does specific mechanics, this is the video for you. We're about 10 weeks into the tier now, so PF strats are mostly settled and decided by now. If you're on EU or JP, this is just macros with extra steps, but I also honestly have no idea what strats y'all do over there. This is not a standalone guide for fight mechanics. This is just a compilation of strats that you're likely to find in PF. So you'll have to do your own research about the fight, but I'll recommend some videos along the way for specific mechanics as a reference. If I don't cover a specific mechanic, it means there's only one way to solve it as a group, so there's not really any point in talking about it. This video is mainly for beginner raiders who have studied the fights but have PF anxiety, or experienced raiders who want to do PF clears but do whack-ass strats with their static. Check out timestamps for quick access to specific fights. Now let's get into it. P5S, the Green Frog. This fight is almost full Hector strats, with a few differences that I'll point out. Go check out his video if I skip past the mechanic. LB3 should be saved for healers in case of PF memes, but melee should obviously use LB for a kill. Setup phase. You will do clock spreads. This will be for the surge and squall mechanic. Healers take west and east. Main tank takes north. Off tank takes south. Melees take the south ender cards for positionals, ranged north ender cards. Standard light parties for surge and ruby baits. This is usually based on clock spreads like so. Tanks should discuss who is invoking the Devour Tower. Some groups will do a Ruby 5 spread that you'll have to remember, but the default positions should be melees in, ranged far out, healers take the middle. Starting with the very first mechanic that can vary, towers. The default strat is roll towers or pairs. You soak the tower with your roll partner. The prio for roll towers is tanks that take the inner set of towers and start north and go counterclockwise. Melees look at the east and go clockwise for the inner towers. Ranged and healers take the outer set of towers. Ranged looks northwest and counterclockwise. Healers look northeast and go clockwise. And you take the first set of towers that you see with your priority. An alternate uncommon strat is light party towers, which is featured in Hector's video. Healer and ranged in each light party soak their towers together. My first PF clear did this strat, but it's pretty uncommon to see these days, since it can cause some confusion. Moving on, Ruby 2 and 3 are self-explanatory. Surge and Squall is done exactly like Hector's video. You spread to your clock position when you need to, and you stack on the healers, which is west and east. Devour, the big scary mechanic. No one wants to be humiliated in front of everyone by the big green frog, but since there's no player interaction in this mechanic, it's just a self-survive mechanic. Just do whatever works for you. I would recommend Junebob's mini Devour guide video, partly because I'm in it. After Devour are Devour Towers. The PF standard for this is called THMR that you might see in a listing. This refers to the order that the towers are soaked, with north being first and going clockwise. These towers spawn statically, so if you're a healer, you'll always go to the east tower. Melees will always go to the south tower. The invuln tank takes north, and the remaining tank should be ready to flex to a tower in case one person fails Devour. Ruby 4, aka Light Party. Default strat is Light Party 1 takes the rock on the middle wall, and Party 2 takes the rock on the outer wall. When in doubt, follow your healer. Ruby 5. As you should know, there should be two safe areas opposite of each other on the cardinals. Group 1 priority is north or west, and Group 2 would take south or east. go to your pre-decided spread spot when needed. You bait your AoEs in the back middle, usually on the healer, and you stack in the cleavage for the party soak. Ruby 6, aka Light Party 2. Like Ruby 4, Group 2 takes the rock on the outer edge, and Group 1 takes the rock on the inside edge. As for what square to go to, the default rule is just follow your Light Party healer. Healers! It would be really cool if we could standardize safe quadrant prio. My suggestion is northeast clockwise. Obviously, don't stick to this if you notice that your co-healer has clearly made up their mind and is sprinting the opposite direction. Northeast clockwise would be nice, but be ready to flex when needed since that is not a common priority system. The rest of the fight is just more surge squalls or towers, so nothing else to talk about. Everything else is pretty straightforward, and that is P5S. P6S. Hedgy Mommy. PF basically does full Hector again. Limit Break 3 should be saved for a tank LB during Cachexia 2. For setup phase, clock spreads aren't necessary, rather you'll be setting up corners. Healers and melees usually take south, tanks and ranged take north. Light Party 1, healer and melee take southwest. Light parties should be based on your corner, but people will usually assign it anyways for some reason. For tank busters, the first Chelic synergy is usually tank invulned by the main tank. The rest can be discussed with your tank partner who wants to take the next invulns. Alright, starting with the fight mechanics. Poly 1. Standard Group 1 is west, Group 2 is east. And you rotate clockwise for the cleave dodge. Pathogenic cells. There's a couple of various strats here, the most common being Diamond Limit Cut. There's a section in Hector's video for a detailed demonstration on this, but if you have 1, 2, 3, 4, you plant yourself on the 1, 2, 3, 4 corresponding waymark, and you swap out with 5, 6, 7, 8 once you get hit. North-South strat. This is uncommon. The safe area is west-east. Odds swap out on the north cardinal, even swap out on the south cardinal. This requires all 8 members to be paying attention to the count so that they don't swap early. Northwest, northeast. Another uncommon strat similar to north-south, but instead of north and south, odds swap out on the northwest, even swap out on the northeast, while the priority is south. This gives melees some additional positional uptime, but again, it requires all 8 members to be counting, and most people are not familiar with this strat. Exchange of agonies, corners. You just go to your assigned corner if you're an outspread. If you're in, stack middle for the rings. Transmission. Common strat is party stays on the south intercardinals, where the northwest pair will usually meet southwest. Snakes go in front, and wings line up in the back. This allows people some uptime without having to turn around. Poly 2, self-explanatory. Exchange of agonies, roll parties. Supports take the west half, DPS take the east half. If you're a spread, the default corners to go are northwest for supports and southeast for DPS. But it doesn't really matter since the AoEs are not that big. Poly 3 light parties. The default position will be Group 1 takes the safe square on the north half, while Group 2 takes the south. You may happen to see light parties on the same square instead, where 1 is closer to the middle and 2 is on the edge, but when in doubt, keep an eye on where your healer goes and just follow them. Dark Ashes, you just go to your corner for a spread, with the melees and tanks getting the inner squares and the ranged being out. Don't forget to dodge the double cleaves. Cachexia. Probably the mechanic that most people are watching P6 for. The most common strat is the timers strat, aka 28, 12, 16. Hector has a dedicated mini video for this, but you just position yourself around the boss hitbox depending on your timer, and you step in a bit when it's your turn to take the hit. There is a moderate chance of accidentally getting clipped by AoEs if people are not spread far apart enough. So just be wary, and if you're ranged, it's okay to be all the way out so you don't clip anyone. Alternate common strat is the 20s in strat. Ilya's video demonstrates this strat in his guide. The 20s start inside the hitbox, and the 8, 12s, and 16s spread around it. After the 8 and then the 12 AoE goes off, 8 rotates to the 12 spot so that the 20 has a path to exit after they take the proximity hit and spread. After the 20 takes the hit, the 8 goes in and exits north as well, followed by 12 and 16. There is less of a chance of getting clipped with this mechanic than timers, but requires the 8 and 12 players to be counting hits properly so that they know who's going in first. There is an alternate version of this called Emi Strat, which is uncommon, that has slightly different positionings, but the concept is the same. Poly 4, go to your corner. If your normal spot is unsafe, you have time to adjust with your corner partner, but usually supports will take the left safe square relative to the boss. Poly 5 is self-explanatory. P8S 2, there's not really much to say about this strat, especially because tank LB3s this, but the stack is usually within the middle 2 squares, and the one with the AoE spread usually goes to the far edge. Rest of the mechanics are pretty unambiguous. If you know how to do it, you know how to do it. And that's P6S. Alright, P7S, the tree. This fight is 90% Hector strats, so I won't go over things too much. Limit break 3 should be saved for healers in case of harvest disasters, and the DPS check is mostly irrelevant now with the majority of people having pretty good gear. Setup phase, you will do corners. This is for invalidate bonds spread as well as birds and tower prio. Melees go north, range goes south. Light parties, usually based on corners as always, and you'll likely see a purgation spread spot. Every party sets it up a bit different, but most of the time the B is for the stack. Usually healers and casters get the middle or south spot since it requires the least amount of movement. Alternatively, some PF groups do purgation colors, which is just a weird way of saying match your color for your purgation spot instead of position. Occasionally, some groups will do death spots or far war spots, and that's just a way of assigning positions for those mechanics. Alright, going over the easy stuff real quick. Fruit 1. Group 1 takes the north safe spot, Group 2 takes the south safe spot. Group 2, just make sure you don't get hit by the tree AoE. Don't be too south. Next is roll party stacks. Stacks just go in the middle of the platforms, and the spreads go to your corner. Fruit 2, this is the one with knockbacks plus birds with a final stack. For the spread, just find any safe spot that isn't being used. There's over 12 different spots that you can pick from, so there's plenty of time to just adjust. As for the light party soak, default is Group 1 northwest, Group 2 south. This is mainly so your white mage and scholar can drop a bubble on the bridge. Group 4, there's only one real way to do this, so I won't go over it. For light party knockbacks, Group 1 takes southwest knockback, Group 2 takes southeast. Group 5, birds towers. I know JP does that weird clockwise tether, but in NA, all you have to do if you have a tether is drag it across the center of the arena. For towers, take the tower that's closest to your corner prio that was assigned at the beginning. Sometimes the towers can spawn a bit funky, so you just have to make sure you're looking at all the towers and not taking someone else's. Purgation, it's always going to be the sleepo purgation strat. Just look at Hector's video for that, and remember your pre-assigned spot at the beginning. Famine, only one real way to do this. Non-tethers just bait, and tethers make sure to cross. Death's Harvest, everyone does static death, aka JP death. This method requires both tanks to invuln, but the other 6 party members can go to a static spot relative to the bull regardless of how the tethers get assigned. If this was not pre-assigned at the beginning, the default position is turn your camera so that the bull is south, and then Group 1 goes to the new northwest platform, and Group 2 goes to the new northeast platform. Healers usually take the spot that's closest to the bull, which is on the close outer edge. Ranged go to the far outer edge, and melees take the far inner edge. This isn't set in stone, and sometimes you'll have to flex if you see someone in your spot already, but just be mindful of your party members and look for an empty spot. Finally, war. There's 3 strats that you should be aware of. All far, very common strat. The idea behind this is it doesn't require any thinking. Everyone just drags their tether across the center of the arena as far as possible. Birds should end up on a bridge, and minnows should end up on a platform. Before, yak tethered players should go to their pre-assigned formation if it was assigned, else they should just adjust with 2 on the bridge and 2 slightly off the bridge. Downside of this strat is there's a very high chance a yak can get clipped by a minnow due to imprecise positioning, but it requires the least amount of individual thinking, so it's used commonly for PF. In Umaru War, this is also pretty common. Yaks spread on the yak platform, they have it easy. Minnows and birds have to position like so. Keep in mind the fruit spawns can be horizontally flipped, so you'll have to be ready to mentally adjust if you're a bird or a minnow. If done correctly, this strat is very unlikely to cause deaths, but it requires the birds and minnows to correctly determine which way to pull their tether. Downside of this strat is there's a heavy dependence on minnows and birds to not mess up and pull the wrong way. If they do mess up, it can cause a disaster wipe, which could kill both healers and end the run right there. If you have faith in your party members, this is a good strat, but of course you run the risk of wiping on the last real mechanic of the fight. Finally, Hector War. This is very uncommon to see in PF. This was the war version covered in Hector's P7 video. It's slightly more convoluted than in Umaru since birds have to additionally figure out if they're going long or short, but you can just pull it up if a PF is running it. Rest of the fight is easy. Light Party 1 takes west and Group 2 takes east, but you already knew that. Now finish off the tree and move on to P8. P8S Phase 1. Mostly full Hector strats. Go ahead and watch his video. But there's a couple of differences, mainly in fourfold. For the setup phase, clock spots, this will be for dog 1 spread, and every assignment after this can be derived from clocks, but parties will usually set them up anyways. I'll show you the default layout. Light parties for stacks and snake prio. Corners, this is for volcanic torches, manifold, as well as the end of fourfold spreads. And fourfold spreads, you'll usually assign both same side fourfold and opposite corner fourfold, and this will be for octaflare mid fourfold. And finally, a dog 2 lineup. Going into the fight mechanics, snake 1 prio is when the snakes spawn, group 1 takes the northwest counterclockwise looking snake. Group 2 looks north and goes clockwise. Melee DPS and tanks need to flex groups if you and your light party partner has the same debuff. So group 1 melee would act as a group 2 prio if they need to flex. Dog 1 will always be the uptime dog strat mentioned in the Hector guide. Odds go northeast, evens go mid, and you swap out after the hit. PFs will sometimes list this as up dog strategy, so go ahead and ask, what's up dog? Manifold, go to your signed corner at the beginning, and melees in, ranged out into the safe square. Roll that doesn't get hit moves in to bait proteins on intercardinals, while the ones that did get hit are safe on the cardinals. Fourfold, party square priority varies here a bit from Hector. For opposite corner flares, in the Hector video he showed group 1 taking north and group 2 taking south. Instead, in Party Finder, group 1 will always take the west safe square, and group 2 takes east. Remember, this is only if the mid fourfold are opposite corner spreads. Octaflare spreads should be pre-assigned as well as boss relative. For the same side events, use the pre-assigned spreads at the beginning, but this will always be boss relative. When facing the boss from the safe side, Party 1 should be on the left and Party 2 should be on the right. And go to your spread if it's octo. Meet up with your partner if it's tetra. Range with ranged, melee with melee. If you're having trouble conceptualizing boss relative spreads, these are all the possible same side octaflare spreads, depending on which side is safe. For the final octo or tetra stacker spread, these positions should be taken from your initial corner, the one you used for the very first volcanic torch spread. In case you didn't realize, your tetraflare partner would be different mid fourfold versus the end of fourfold. and your final spreads are relative north. Snake 2, it's always Spriggan strat. These are static spots. Your position will be your clock spot, but slightly clockwise to the nearest skull marker on the ground. Shoot the nearest snake when it's your turn to gaze, and as for the final party stack, the party prio is the same as snake 1. So group 1, northwest counterclockwise, group 2 takes the north clockwise snake. Melees or tanks will again need to flex parties if both Omni Gazes or Poisons are in the same light party, so they need to be paying attention to the debuffs. For Dog 2, in case of Die Flare, Group 1 takes the closest edge, Group 2 outer, max melee. Or Tetra Flare, if they are assigned, go to your Tetra lineup spot. If unassigned, the default is like this. And that's the end of Phase 1. Now to P8S Phase 2, the final stretch. Almost every PF does things similarly. The go-to video for this fight is Renon's video, specifically for NA Fire Ice and High Concept 1 and 2. Setup phase, clocks. This is used for NA1 spread first. Optional, you can do a same side spread for NA1 spread second. Optional, you can also do a fire spot spread to determine who's baiting fire. If you're not doing a waymark assignment, you should be discussing in the chat who wants to bait the fire and which melee and tank wants to ice flex. Limitless Desolation spreads. This is usually the same lineup as Dog 2 and NA2 spreads. This will vary depending on if you're doing NA2 mid or NA2 west, and the way the markers are set up will cue the party members on which strategy is to be expected. Finally, each role partner should determine who wants to flex for Dominion. Optionally, you can also discuss Iagonia mids, but we'll talk about default mids later on. So going into the fight, tank busters. The main tank should be involving the first tank buster, off tank should be involving the third tank buster. If there's a warrior, they should be involving both 1 and 4. That's home gang privilege. NA1, this one is slightly different and I haven't really seen any videos talk about how Party Finder does it, but the party will always start stacked. If it's spread first, everyone goes to their static clock spread. Even if you have the NA buff, you will still go to your clock spread. You will not be going north. After the spread, the NAs move north while the parties stack on the safe half for healing. If it's stacked first, NA moves north, rest of the party moves south. For the following spread, if it's assigned, go to your spread spot. If it was not assigned, kind of just adjust, but the default spread looks something like this, but just be ready to adjust on the fly. For Fire and Ice, check out Renon's / Scripe's visual guide positions. In general, it's supports left, DPS right, and tanks and melees flex middle for fire. And one tank and melee should be ready to flex ice when that's needed as well. High Concept 1, I would highly recommend checking out Renon's visual guide or Junebub's HC guide. But to quickly summarize it, short alphas go to A, short betas go to B, short gammas go to C. 2 buff goes to the 2-way mark, the 3 buff goes to the 3-way mark. Long alpha will stack with 2, while the long betas and long gammas stack on 3. After the AoEs, the 2 debuff fills clockwise, the 3 debuff fills counterclockwise, skipping over the short alpha beta gamma that was not used in the first set of towers. For the second set of towers, the long alpha beta gammas should combine between the south pair of towers, and the fills and the reused should combine between the north towers. This is important since there's not a lot of time to adjust between north or south towers, and you will wipe if someone does not go to their default combining place. Limitless Desolation. Support should line up on the west wall, DPS line up on the right wall. Go to your assigned spread if it was assigned, if not, it will look something like this. The idea behind this strat is members take their random AoE hits, spread along the wall, and they move along the middle lane to drag their meteor AoE. This isolates the people exploding from the people that need to move to their tower, so it reduces the chance of accidentally getting clipped by someone's random explosion. Some videos show people lining up in the middle of your safe half. In Party Finder, it's usually on the side wall, and you move along the middle. NA2. If you have the NA buff and you are reversed, it's common practice to jump a few times when it's your turn for the bars. PF will either do NA2 mid or NA2 west. NA2 mid means that the NA buffed pair go to the middle for spreads and the party stacks middle for the stack. NA2 west means that the NA2 buffed people stay far west for both stacks and spreads. This requires less movement than NA2 mid and a lower chance of NA2 buffed people getting clipped by the spread since they're more far apart. So I would recommend party finders use NA2 west. A little bit less intuitive though, and people might not be familiar with it. NA2 fire ice is the same as NA1. Just be aware of reversed buffs, and remember, if you are reversed, do a couple of jumps to signal that you're reversed. HC2, this is standardized to be the Rhenon strat. Short alpha, beta, gammas go to your respective waymark corners. The 2 buff player goes to 2, solo buff goes to 3. Long alpha, beta, gamma with no stack buff goes to the 2. The unbuffed pair should go to short alpha and combine after the AoEs go off. For the second set of towers, long alpha and beta always combine between the east pair of towers and the unused tower 1, and long gamma should combine on the west set of towers. This priority is pretty important since there is little to no time to adjust if someone goes to the wrong place. For adds, the people who took tower 1 should take that direction add. So if you took the north tower for the first set of towers, you take the north add. For Ifrits, you pre-position yourself during the defamation AoEs. The one closer to the west add will take the west add. The east sprints across and takes the east add. You can also type in the chat, so Ifrits need to keep an eye on the chat in case their partner mentions which one they're going to go to. If you did HC2 correctly, it's time for the last mechanic. Before ego death finishes, make sure you use melee LB3 and that the party is fully topped off if you're a healer. DPS players, now is the time to use Second Wind and Bloodbath if you have not. If you did not discuss the minion flexes or Dominion mitts yet, do so during the cutscene in the chat box. The standard Dominion Tower prio is THMR, which is tanks, healers, melee, ranged in that order. Some groups will do THRM so that the ranged players are a bit closer to the healers, and while I do think it's better, it's not the party finder normal, so I would not recommend bringing this up since it can only cause confusion. Healers, sorry, but you're just gonna have to pay an extra close eye on the range. Tanks as well can help out, drop some mitt for the ranged players. Do your NA2 spread spots for the Dominion AoEs, and soak your towers when it's your time to. If Iagonia mitt has not been discussed yet, I'm proposing this as the standard default mitt plan. If the third Iagonia is under-mitted, it will one-shot most of the team, so the mitigation check is no joke. If everyone's still standing after it, you have about 20 seconds to deal the finishing blow, which shouldn't be a problem if you had a clean deathless run. And that's it! From start to finish, that's everything you needed to know about party findering the Abyssos Savage raid tier. If any part of this has helped you in any way, it would honestly make me pretty happy to hear about it, so share your PF experiences down below and I'll enjoy reading them. Shout out to all the PF warlords out there grinding for the re-clears, and shout out to some of my friends as well for helping me out. Also shout out to Yoshi P for making Lily's not a DPS loss, and I'll see you next time. Good luck in Party Finder, gamers.